Hi friends, Dr. Jerry Duggar here. One of the major areas that I focus on in my practice with my clientele is hormone balance. So many symptoms of ill health are tied to the function of these critical chemical messengers. Things like mental clarity and memory, energy, weight management, sleep, mental health and happiness, bone strength, digestive function, not to mention sexual health and reproduction. These are all intimately connected and tied to the balance of this complex symphony of hormones. Now, what's surprising to me is that so many of my patients have serious hormone issues. I'm seeing it in both men and women, and now often in younger folks, even teenagers. If it seems like you're noticing a lot more hormone issues being talked about amongst your family and friends, it's really happening. You're absolutely not hallucinating on that. Now, the hormonal system is incredibly complex. There's over 50 different hormones and pre-hormones. They're all interconnected and playing off of one another. They're constantly changing and trying to help us adapt to our environment, moment by moment. Most of these hormones are secreted in very, very small amounts throughout the day, and a little goes a long way. Almost all of these hormones operate in what we call a negative feedback loop. What do I mean by negative feedback loop? It's kind of like the thermostat in your home. There's a temperature sensor in the room or the hallway where the thermostat is, and it's reading the temperature, and that is communicating back to your HVAC system, your heater, and it is turning things on and turning things off. If the temperature is too high, it will turn off the heater and potentially turn on the air conditioner. If the temperature is too low, then it's going to trigger to kick on the heater. But as soon as the temperature rises to your set point, there's a negative feedback. It feeds back to the system, says you can stop production now. So that's the way most of these hormones work. There's a connection between the receptors in the body and the production sites in the glands themselves. Now think about this. If, back to our analogy of the thermostat, if your temperature in your room was too cold, I suppose there's several things that you could do. You could just put a sweater on, not really address why the temperature is off, what's the issue with the settings or the feedback mechanism itself. You could just adapt, right? You could just put on a sweater or a jacket and you'd feel fine. But you probably could ask some other questions like, I wonder why it's cold in here. Is the window open? Did the thermostat battery die? That's happened to me before. Did somebody accidentally reset the thermostat? You might think something changed. It didn't used to be this way. Now it's this way. So what changed? Now, literally just this morning, I had a patient come to me and say, hey, I need to talk to you about a recent experience I just had. My wife set up an appointment for me and her to go into a hormone specialist doctor. And they did a blood test and they told me that my testosterone was too low and they wanted to put me on some pellets and to stick a pellet full of testosterone in my butt cheek. And something about that experience just didn't sit really well with me. So I thought, why don't I ask Dr. Duggar about this? So he literally asked me that question today and I said, hey, you're in luck. I'm talking about this on the podcast this week. So these sort of clinics are popping up all over the place. It's very popular. More and more people are learning about the fact that our environment, our current modern lifestyle is causing hormone levels. And so they're coming to these clinics, they're running a blood test that says, oh yes, your testosterone's low or your estrogen's low or da-da. They run a simple blood test and immediately, as soon as they see the number low, they immediately recommend replacement. So why did we get so enamored with this idea that any low value on a lab test needs to be treated with a replacement hormone? I think that this model kind of came out of the way we approached menopause and treatment of menopausal women who had symptoms of hot flashes and what have you. We started to put them on hormone replacement. And in the early days, these hormones were all synthetic. They were not the exact hormones that our bodies make. And so they ran into some trouble. Now, along the line, we've identified ways to get biologically identical hormones, which are much, much safer and far better. And so, when a woman is in postmenopause, her ovaries have stopped production. They've actually stopped production of estrogen and testosterone and progesterone. So it makes sense in those situations that when you see a low value and certain symptoms, or even if you're just trying to prevent other problems in the future, you might want to replace those hormones to a little bit higher level. So taking that thought process, though, and extrapolating that anybody at any time in any circumstance with a low hormone level needs a replacement is way oversimplification, and it's just short-sighted. So this is what happened to my patient. A man who is, 40 years old, he can absolutely make more testosterone. The question was never asked what's going on in your life, what's happening with all the other circumstances around, your health. It was just, hey, levels are low, let's replace it. And by the way, let's replace it with the most expensive way, and the way that doesn't really mimic the way your body makes testosterone, but it makes the doctor a lot of money. And it's very convenient for the patient. And so, hey, this is the way that a lot of these clinics are going. And I'm just going to posit that it's not the best approach. So it can be very helpful for people to feel better quickly. And isn't that what we're all about in Western civilization? How fast can you make me feel better? But it's not really addressing the root cause. And that's why he came to me and said, there's got to be something else I'm missing here. What do I need to do to really get to the root of this? And how do we approach this in a much more holistic or comprehensive way? So this doesn't just happen with testosterone. This happens with thyroid hormones. This happens with estrogen and progesterone. Anyway, all of the hormones kind of get this same approach. If the levels are low, here's a drug, here's a replacement from the outside. Even when replacement is part of the solution, it's not the whole solution. So let's back up a few steps and let's wrap our heads around what's going on with hormone function in modern America and modern civilization, because there definitely are problems. First, we need to think about what drives hormone production down, like what could be interfering with hormone production. There are a lot of potential causes, but let's just talk about a couple big ones. Number one, I want to talk about environmental factors. Here's some really scary statistics from a reproductive epidemiologist named Shauna Swan at Mount Sinai. Wrote a book based on her research called The Countdown. Listen to these stats. Between the years of 1973 and 2011, human male sperm counts have dropped by 59.3%. A significant portion of the population won't be able to conceive children without technological assistance by the year 2050, if those trends continue. This decline in sperm counts is the result of a dangerous increase in man-made chemicals called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, and they're now everywhere in our environment. And so Swan noted in her book that humans already met 3 out of the 5 criteria for an endangered species. Now, it's hard to really wrap your head around when there's 8 billion of us here, but the point is the trend that we're able to observe. Things are shifting, and things are shifting in the wrong direction relatively quickly over the course of, this was a 40-year span. So let's talk a little bit about these endocrine disrupting chemicals. They're widespread because they're often found in plastic products. They're similar in structure to our natural sex hormones, and so they interfere with normal function of these hormones. So what are some of these endocrine disrupting compounds or chemicals? You might have heard of this first one called BPA, or a bisphenol A. It's found in food can lining, cash register receipts, pages. A lot of plastic bottles and things used to have BPA. We started to learn more about this, and the industry started to shift and try to create other plastics, many of which may still be problematic, but they just don't have as much research yet. So we got to watch out for that. Other chemicals are called phthalates. These are found in PVC products, vinyl shower curtains, aesthetics, perfumes, nail polish, these sort of things. Flame retardants are another major endocrine disruptor. Solvents, lubricants that are used in industry and in our homes and our products. Pesticides, heavy metals. There's a list of these you can research online. In 2015, there was a report also that linked these endocrine disrupting compounds and chemicals to reproductive health issues, including hormone-related cancers, prostate disorders, thyroid disease, neurodevelopmental issues. So the truth is, we're living in an ever-increasing swamp of toxins in our environment. More than 80,000 man-made chemicals are now in our environment. We're regularly being exposed to these things. So we have to think about the air that we breathe and the things that we put on our body and the things that we put in our body, the water that we're drinking. If you've got hormone levels that are low because of toxic exposure and you aren't changing your lifestyle and your habits that are creating the exposures, just pumping in more hormone isn't going to solve the problem. I hope you see that. So what are a couple tips really quickly just to kind of lower this toxic burden? Eat organic produce whenever you can. Buy free-range, hormone-free, grass-fed beef and chicken and poultry. Buy products in glass containers instead of plastic. Store food in glass containers. Don't microwave plastics. Watch out for those non-stick pans. Use glass, use ceramic, use stainless steel, cast iron. These are all much better. Drink filtered. Use a shower head with a filter. So anyway, there's a lot of things. You can do a deep dive into this if you'd like, but thinking first about the exposure we have to things that disrupt our hormones is a wise first step. Okay, so what about other factors? How about physical and mental, emotional stress? We know that physical and mental and emotional stress drives up the production of a really important regulatory hormone called cortisol. Cortisol kind of sits in the middle of a lot of different hormone pathways in our body. And when cortisol levels are up, we're going to see a decrease in testosterone. We're going to see a decrease in many other hormones. It's going to affect thyroid function and how well our cells can even utilize thyroid hormone. So over time, long-term chronic stress we know will disrupt progesterone and estrogen and testosterone and thyroid function. So what's the mechanism? Why would that make any sense? Think about it kind of evolutionarily. If you're under threat and you're faced with imminent danger, which is kind of what this fight or flight part of our body is designed to protect us, there really is no rationale for for having balanced hormones so that you can reproduce. In the middle of a famine or a war or, some invading tribe, now's not the time to reproduce, right? Your body needs, if it's in fight or flight or freeze mode, it can't be in rest and digest and procreate mode. These are antithetical. They work opposite of each other. So unfortunately, most of us live in a pretty high stress life, and that stress can be kind of 24/7. And when we get stuck in this sympathetic nervous system dominance, this fight or flight or freeze kind of mode, it disrupts our reproductive hormones and our thyroid hormones. Okay, so that's an important piece to look into. If your thyroid is low, if your testosterone, your estrogen is low, and you're stressed out and your cortisol is out of balance, replacing those hormones isn't going to solve it. Okay, another hormone that has a really profound kind of regulatory impact is insulin. When our blood sugar is out of control, we become resistant to the effect of insulin. Insulin is what brings glucose inside of our cells to be burned. So through some really complex biochemistry, insulin resistance makes us over-convert testosterone into estrogen. I've seen this many, many times. Patients, particularly men, come in, they've got low testosterone, and one of these clinics has put them on testosterone replacement, but it's not working. They don't feel that their symptoms are improving. And so I run a different test that looks at how the body is metabolizing estrogen from testosterone. And what I see is that these men are over-converting. In other words, all the testosterone is just immediately being converted into estrogen. Now, most people don't know this, but all estrogen comes from testosterone. They got converted through a process called aromatization. And things like stress, inflammation, blood sugar imbalances, these drive up aromatase and they cause more conversion into estrogen. So once again, we've got a low level on a test, but we might not know why it's low. And if we can balance our blood sugar, improve insulin sensitivity, we may notice all the improvements and symptomatic resolution of low hormone or imbalanced hormones without having to replace anything. Okay, so what's the take-home point here? All hormones are interrelated. If any hormone is out of balance, if it's lower than it should be, the state of the entire body needs to be considered. It's random to have one level just change with nothing else changing around it. That just doesn't happen in the body. So working on a diet and lifestyle solution will often create the context in which the body can resume producing hormones in the way it wants to, in the way it should, with the little nuances from day to day and moment to moment, being able to tweak and balance these hormones for our best function. So eating a balanced diet. Now, I mean balanced meaning balanced macronutrients so that we have stable blood sugar and low need to produce insulin. So we're talking about a paleo template. We're talking about maybe low carbohydrate or even ketogenic diets. These could all be considered depending on where you are in your own personal space. I'll add to that smart supplementation. Hormone pathways are complex biochemical cascades that require nutrients, vitamins, and enzymes and minerals to make it through this process. So when we're nutrient depleted, if we're not eating a nice healthy diet and we're not taking the right supplementation, we may be kind of messing up the gears, so to speak. I'll also throw in herbs in this kind of scenario because these were traditional medicines and many herbs have a potential to improve our production of hormones and upregulate and stimulate the body in the right way to produce more on its own without having to replace from the outside. So we use a lot of herbs. I think that's really kind of a first line of anytime we're dealing with a hormone imbalance issue. Now, how about exercise? Gosh, I don't even know that I could enumerate all of the different mechanisms by which exercise influences and balances hormones. Improved insulin sensitivity, improved metabolism of hormones, improved cell receptor function. Keeping our body weight down and having a lot of lean muscle has a profound impact on lowering this over aromatization thing that I talked about before. So our fat cells can function like little endocrine systems and they pump out estrogen. And so now we got too much estrogen relative to progesterone and testosterone and we create these imbalances. So exercise and diet and all of these things, if they can help us to lose weight, lose body fat, and improve lean muscle mass, we're going to see much better hormone function without having to replace. How about sleep? According to a study that was published in the International Journal of Endocrinology back in 2015, the regulation and metabolism of several hormones are influenced by interactions between the effects of sleep and the intrinsic circadian system. Growth hormone, melatonin, cortisol, leptin, ghrelin, those are related to our appetite and how much food our body's telling us to eat. These are highly correlated with sleep and circadian rhythmicity. Sleep disturbance negatively impacts hormonal rhythms and metabolism and is also associated with obesity, insulin sensitivity, diabetes, appetite dysregulation. So what does that mean? There's a lot of big words in there. But all it's really saying is that in order for us to have proper hormone balance, we have to have adequate amount of sleep. Now here's the kicker. Sometimes when our hormones are out of balance, it actually makes it hard for us to sleep. So now we have to solve that problem first. Get the sleep happening. Get the diet impeccable. Get exercise and activity improving. Lower mental and emotional stress. Remove ourselves from situations that are constantly driving cortisol up. You know, if we aren't addressing these kind of root issues, these comprehensive, holistic approaches, just pumping in more hormone might temporarily make you feel better, but it hasn't addressed everything in the in the chain of events that leads to the hormone being produced. You know, I get it. We all want our hormones to be balanced and at the right levels. We want to feel young and vital. We just want to feel amazing. And so it makes sense for us to reach for something that's really simple. You know, hey, doc, just hand me a pill. Hey, just stick this pellet in my butt cheek. Hey, give me this injectable and I'll inject it. Like I said, if you've completely lost the ability to make these hormones, well, then we might want to talk about replacing. But most of us can really affect our body's ability to continue to produce hormones the way they naturally would. But it does take some effort. But that effort will help you be vital and live a long, healthy life. I believe that approach will dramatically decrease the number of people who need to be on hormone replacement, or at least prolong the years before we need that. So don't get sucked into the quick fix advertising that says, do you have low T? We've got this shot for you. Do you have low thyroid function? Come on in, we'll replace it. No, let's back up and let's approach this from a functional perspective. Let's look at root cause and let's build a foundation of health and wellness so that we need far less of that intervention and we can be our own best doctor most of the time. All right, everybody, that's it for today. I hope that gives you some things to think about. Really dial in your lifestyle. If you need help, we'd be happy to help you. Make sure you reach out to us at duggarwellness.com. Get a copy of our Simple 7 Lifestyle book, and make sure you tune in each week as we bring you more content to help you live your best life. All right, now let's all go out there and do some good in the world today.